Week 3 wrapping up. Week 4 takeaways from Rags to Richardson. Richardson is back. Is he an every week starter? Let's find out right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Razzball Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Sky Guasco. You can find me on Twitter at Sky Guasco, SkyGuasco. Of course, my man Derek Favret, and of course, Gladys Tyler as well in the hot seat. Bob is on tilt for the Monday Night Football game with the Giants. So he asked me to step in so he can enjoy this game in peace. So I'm happy to oblige. So we'll be breaking down, of course, the week 4 takeaways. Gladys and Derek are knocking this out every single week, so they know the drill, and I'm going to do my best. Of course, for anybody unfamiliar or not yet following, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell as well, so you make sure to catch all of our alerts. Leave a comment below with your top takeaway from your fantasy team this week, positive or negative. We're going to get into 7 top takeaways tonight. And also, please make sure to follow us on the podcast as well, Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Anywhere you listen to your podcast, all of these episodes are repurposed in audio form for those of you on the go. I always rep it that I'm listening to it when I'm walking the dog, in between work shifts, while I'm working out, what have you. You can catch it if you don't catch us live right here on YouTube. And Derek, before we get going here, please make sure everybody knows what they can catch on Sunday mornings right here on the Razzball Fantasy Football Show.
Yeah, that's right. Every Sunday morning, we're here for a couple hours before kickoff, giving all your start and sits recommendations. Even yesterday, we had a number of really good questions, some really tough ones, and I think we, as it turned out, we gave some pretty good advice. So recommend everyone come join us, have some fun.
We did. Absolutely excited about that. We are flopping people in and out every single weekend, so you never know who you're going to catch on the Razzball Fantasy Football Live Show, but you can drop all of your questions in, and any 4 of us and Gladys will make sure to be there to knock out as many questions as we possibly can 2 hours before kickoff. And of course, you can catch Gladys' article, Derek's article, my article, Bob's article, Matt's, and everybody else on football.razzball.com for free. Check out our articles every single week and make sure you drop a comment or 2. Matty Styles, over 80 comments on his article last week. Pretty unbelievable, but he is 1,000% going to be answering all of those, so make sure you tune in. All right, without any further ado, let's jump into it. We got the top takeaways from week 4. We're going to jump into one off the top for everybody right now. Big question here. I'm struggling with this one myself. I'm a huge T. Higgy guy. Everyone loves Jamar Chase. I was the one to bat for Joe Mixon this year. And of course, we all love Joe Burrow when healthy. Bengals look bad, and it's not looking like it's going to look good anytime soon. Derek, I'll start with you straight up. Is it time to bench the Bengals?
You really got to consider it. Just depends on your team makeup. But, Burrow, he looked like he may be, he's still rusty. Of course, he's got the injury, but he looked like against Baltimore, he was putting it together, but then it's just been back-to-back efforts of really subpar performance. And, he's got some good matchups coming up. So you got to, if you're optimistic, you got to stick with him, but it's getting tough. And, Mixon, you mentioned Mixon. He's yet to go over 67 yards rushing in 4 games. That's not what you drafted him for. So that's tough. And then, of course, with the wide receivers and Higgins with the fractured ribs now, it's tough to play those Bengals. If you sit them, you're going to get burned at some point because they're on it. There's just too much talent there to really just give up on them. But it's getting tough.
Gladys, your thoughts?
I think that yes, I would consider sitting them, but I think that you should also consider that they probably had brunt of their schedule, having to play the AFC North, having to have those divisional games, which are always unpredictable and which are always harder than normal, and that Burrow didn't once again have preseason. So I wouldn't drop them, but I would look at the matchup before I would consider playing them.
Yeah, it's tough. And the biggest issue too is we haven't had any consistency.
Yes.
Right? Joe Burrow came off the shin injury, the calf injury, ends up playing, and then Jamar Chase comes out with a dud. T. Higgins then goes off. Then Jamar Chase comes back with 90% of a vintage game for him. Joe Mixon hasn't really gone off yet, but he's actually been the most consistent, but it hasn't been very productive necessarily. The only thing that's going well for Joe Mixon is that he's a running back. And unfortunately, we have a bunch of our top tier guys not at 100% or not producing very well. So anybody getting 15, 20 touches, no matter how they're producing, has to be in your lineup. The problem is with Joe Mixon, you're not getting 100-yard games. This offensive line is completely torn up. The defense is bad. Joe Burrow just looks bad. So I totally agree. Joe Mixon, I hate to say auto start because he's not producing very well, but I do think it would be hard to replace him unless you're rich at running back. Jamar Chase is really hard to bench, obviously, especially with T. Higgins injured now. But if you have other guys, like, it seems insane, but if you had Puka Nacua and Nico Collins, who you accidentally drafted in the 14th and 15th round as bye week pickups, I'm 100% playing both of those guys every week over Jamar Chase. It might sound crazy, but we play it week to week and season long. So we're not saying, rage bench these guys, but I do have a trade article coming out Wednesday morning, and spoiler alert, I'm not having the Bengals on my roster. All right, let's get into the number 2 here. Gladys, you're up. Emerging rookie quarterbacks is Richardson and Stroud, 3-week starter. Talk about two guys who might be able to play over Joe Burrow.
Exactly what I was going to say. We were just talking about Burrow, and I would play Richardson. I would play Stroud over Burrow, regardless of the matchup. Stroud's actually killing it. I mean, the fact that DeMeco Ryans is allowing him to sling it. He's third in yards per attempt. He's 8.0 yards per attempt. CJ Stroud, come on now. And he's fourth in passing yards, and he's seventh. They're seventh in team play passing yards. So out of 32 teams, Houston Texans are passing at the 7th most of any team right now.
Love that.
I know. Well, I would have loved it a lot more if it wasn't against the Steelers last week. But yeah, I still love it. I'm still, yay, Stroud. Richardson, Richardson's floor is so high because he's going to get a rushing touchdown. He's going to get the rushing yards. So Burrow's limping on one leg right now. Garoppolo, we don't know what's going on with him. Deshaun Watson, we don't know what's going on with him. I would even play him over Dak Prescott right now. Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud are every week starters, regardless of the matchup. I'm calling it right now. What's up, Matthew?
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I'm going to jump in here and take a shout out. Maddie Styles tuning in here from afar. Nico Collins and Puka Nacua equaling league winners. Yes. Correct. And of course, you can take a shot at us on Sunday mornings as well. And shout out to Styles as well for being on the Puka train before it was cool. I want to make sure that we all remember that. All right, let's move in here to number 3. Derek, you're up. Can we trust Baker Mayfield the rest of the season? And speaking of Matt Styles, we all laughed at him about a month ago when he
talking about being on the hype train before it became one, before it even got out of station. We did a show before the season started. Some of our really out
predictions,
off
crazy
the wall
calls.
Plays, if you will. And his was Baker Mayfield being a top 12 quarterback. Well, right now he's 13. But so think about it though. I mean, he's scoring more fantasy points than Jared Goff, Geno Smith, Matthew Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, of course, David Carr, of course, he's hurt now. I mean, just like you were saying, Gladys, we've got, 2 rookie quarterbacks where you've got to consider starting every week. Well, I think you're starting to, you've got to consider Baker in this conversation as well. Of course, they're on bye this next week, but after that, they're hosting Detroit, they're hosting Atlanta. Those are 2 starts where, especially with some buys in there. I mean, if you've got Baker, you've got to consider starting him. He's been relatively consistent. Again, a little over 17 fantasy points per game. Baker's still Baker. Let's not get crazy or anything. But you need to win your matchups. And if you're running out, Trevor Lawrence right now or Daniel Jones, and you've got Baker on your bench, you're probably doing something wrong. So, yeah, I'm not going to say I'm not going to give Matt all the credence that he's Baker's going to be a top 12 quarterback at the end, but shout out to my buddy Styles. I mean, he
Hey,
was
so far, so good.
on this one as well. So good going. But yeah, I think you've got to consider starting him every week now.
Yeah, so far so good. And like you said, Baker's number 13 right now, and limited upside, of course, because he's just not going to have those big plays. Not a lot of pass volume like they had with Brady and Jameis Winston, Fitzmagic over the years in Tampa. It's just not that type of team. Also, folks, we are officially in bye land. So the Bucs are on bye, so you won't be playing Baker Mayfield this week no matter what. Also, Mike Evans came up with a hammy. He's good for one or two of those every single season. Thankfully for us, hopefully it didn't burn you too bad on Sunday, but thankfully for us, it comes up on a bye week. He should be back in week 6, hopefully ready to go. But Baker Mayfield's as good a streamer as we have out there. Derek, you're totally right. It'd be hard for me to play him over guys like Goff, especially at home, or even Trevor Lawrence or something like that. But like we just talked about with Joe Mixon, or Jamar Chase, like if you have better options, you have better options. I like that. All right, let's go into number 4 here, starting the tight ends versus the Atlanta Falcons defense. So this one's interesting. The Atlanta Falcons are giving up the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end position. Their defense is actually quite stout. Their secondary is much better than people give credit for. And their defensive line is first against the run right now. But if you have one weakness in the defense, it is to the tight end position. And we like to find those matchups because so many of us are streaming tight end. So let me rattle off a few of the tight ends coming up against Atlanta. Spoiler alert, not a lot of exciting names, but I'll throw a couple at you here for the next few weeks. So next week we have Dalton Schultz for the Houston Texans. Finally came out and caught a touchdown last week. We have the Washington tandem there. Thomas came back finally, and he looked pretty well. Cade Otton, for what it's worth, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then you have Chika Okonkwo, who we're all expecting to have a bigger season than he's had so far. Hopefully that works out. TJ Hawkinson in week 9 is going to be massive. And then Zach Ertz before the bye week in week 10. So not some, exciting names per se, but streamable options. And again, we're looking to find those weaknesses when we're looking to stream quarterback and or tight end position. So we're looking to start our tight ends against the Atlanta Falcons. And so far, Musgrave had a nice game. Sam Laporta has been crushing everybody, but he had a great game. And then Evan Ingram as well in London. So take a look there at the tight end position and start your tight ends versus the Atlanta Falcons. All right, let's get back up to the top here. Gladys, you're back up. Are the Bears back, or were they just mile high for week 1? The Bears come up short, should have got the dub. They came up a little bit short, but they at least showed a little life for the first time this season.
So I think the original premise was, are the Bears a victim of personnel, or are they a victim of coaching? Are they being sabotaged by bad coaching decisions, or are they just not good on the field? And I believe that it is the bad coaching decisions that are hampering their success. The defense isn't good. I mean, the defense is giving up close to 200. They're 27th in the passing yards. They're giving up 267.8 passing yards a game. But the rushing yards, they're mid-range. They're like holding them steady. I don't think that a team can overcome bad coaching, no matter how good a player is. So, like, take for instance the Tua situation. Change a coach, he's all of a sudden miraculously a star, right? I think that the Bears are going to, as the Steelers, have to change some coaching personnel in order for them to be good. So they played well. They just didn't play well enough to win, and there are no moral victories in football. I mean, you lost. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think the moral victory for the Bears is they're on track for the number 1 and the number 2 pick in the draft, right?
They are, which to be honest with you is pretty incredible. I mean, hypothetically, Caleb Williams right now projected to go number 1. Marvin Harrison could go number 2. That could completely change their franchise. But then you're talking about maybe getting rid of Justin Fields and, DJ Moore would be the number one still, but Marvin Harrison's coming out as a number one prospect as well. So who knows what'll happen, that's in April, right? So we're 6 months ahead of ourselves here, but it is an interesting, situation. My question is, I'm going to throw this out there and you both let me know. They have a bye week in week 13. Let me see how many wins you think the Bears will have. I'll just rattle off. At Washington, win or loss?
Loss.
Minnesota at home.
Loss.
Raiders at home.
Can be a win.
That better be a win.
I'll take a win.
At the Chargers in week 8.
Loss.
At New Orleans.
Ooh.
No, I'm a loss.
Carolina at home.
Win.
Should be a win.
Yeah.
At Detroit, that's a loss. At Minnesota, that's a loss.
Loss.
So hopefully they have 2 wins by their bye week in week 13.
Hasn't Caleb Williams' dad said he might not come out this year?
Yep, totally possible.
Playing the Eli card?
Totally possible. Yeah, I mean,
Don't blame him.
It really depends these days.
Exactly.
As we've seen, and look, I'm not going to get into the Zach Wilson stuff, but we saw last night. We saw last night that the kid has it within him.
Yeah.
As soon as he got drafted, right? I followed that draft so closely because we had Trey Lance and we were going to go with Mac Jones to the 49ers and all that kind of stuff. So I studied those guys all very intently. I actually wanted Zach Wilson because we knew we weren't going to get Trevor Lawrence. I wanted Zach Wilson because coming out, I thought the kid was the best tangibles, right? As soon as he went to New York, I immediately said, I covered it live on my own show back then with the draft. I immediately said the kid's doesn't have a chance. That type of person can't handle New York media, no matter what. And I really think that he'll have a better opportunity somewhere else when they cut him or they trade him or whatever, and he gets a new start in a smaller market. I think he's gonna be fine. We saw that last night a little bit, but
yeah,
a lot of these
skills.
kids,
he still has some skills. He can throw the ball.
Yeah, and these kids come out, and it's all about like who they match up with, right? How many guys have come? I mean, look at C.J. Stroud and who the quarterbacks actually get underneath them and their opportunity.
You could tell when Zach Wilson came out, when he was in that introductory press conference, he looked frightened. He looked like a deer, and he out of headlights.
He was probably terrified.
Yeah, he looked terrified.
The kid grows up in Utah and he goes to New York. I get it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all laugh at them because they're professional athletes, but you got to remember this kid's 20 years old, coming out of college. You it's pretty insane. Beach has shown up here. Takeaways: Burrow, fraud. I hear you there. The Bears are back. Russ is cooking. Do not give up on Fields. I agree with you there. And the 49ers should have gone Mac Jones and given Brock Purdy to New England. No, thank you. Let's move on here. All right. Okay, number 6. Derek, you're back on the clock here. Is Nico Collins an every week starter?
Yeah, he has to be. I mean, if you're the only reason he's not a number 1 right now is you're not watching football. I mean, we already talked about C.J. Stroud, and now he's an every week starter. We talked about the merits of that, but here we have Nico. He's averaging 8 targets per game, 6 receptions per game. He's already has 3 games with over 9 targets. All 3 of those, he ended up with double-digit fantasy points. So yeah, at this point, I think he's actually matchup proof because he's running about a little more than 50-50 out of the wideout, but he's moving between the wideout and the slot. So it's not like we have our slot versus wide tool, and which really helps us take a look at who may have good matchups, but he's actually becoming matchup proof, just the way he's running his routes. And they're going to Atlanta, they have New Orleans, then they go to Carolina, Tampa, Cincinnati, all those matchups. I think he's a must start now.
What would you do with Tank Dell?
Same, and I mentioned it on the show the other day, and I mentioned it. I had a comment in one of my articles this week, asking, because I recommended Nico Collins, and they said, "Well, what about Tank Dell?" And to my response to that reader was, Collins and Dell are this generation's Evans and
Godwin,
yeah, in Tampa. I mean, to me, they look a lot like that. Where they're all Dell, Collins, and C.J. Stroud. They're going to grow together, and they're going to be a tandem for a long time. So I like all three of those, moving through together, and they're going to be a really tough duo for any team.
Okay.
I love Nico Collins, and I like him a lot coming out of Michigan, and I think he's a big product so far in the fantasy community because Michigan, when he came out, was a run, pass type team in the Big Ten, and the skills were just completely pushed under the rug because he just didn't get to highlight those. Goes out to Houston. Nobody's excited about that. Deshaun Watson leaves. Nobody's excited about that. It's been kind of a mess there for a couple of years, Davis Mills and whatnot. So he got kind of just like hidden. This year, I'm kicking myself now, of course, because we always have like drafter regret for good and bads. This is one that I'm really upset with myself that I just straight up chose to miss all summer. I kept looking at ADPs, doing all these shows, doing mock drafts with Bob every Monday for like 3 months. And here's Nico Collins in the 10th round, every single draft, always, all summer. And I kept being like, yeah, but Texans, like, I don't care that he's a number one. I don't want 5 targets. Like, I just can't handle that. And here we go. And nobody saw Tank Dell coming, but Nico Collins was free out there for the pickings. And I just didn't trust CJ Stroud. And I don't think anybody else did. But DeMeco Ryans is doing a hell of a job over there. They're running the 49ers system, which we've seen is very successful in multiple offenses now throughout the NFL. So they're doing very good. And this is 4 weeks now. And CJ Stroud is not a joke, obviously. Over 300 yards in multiple weeks. He's the only quarterback, he's the 6th quarterback in NFL history to throw for 300 yards in each of his starts, in his first 4 starts to start a season. The other ones are all Hall of Famers, right? Brady, Breeze, Manning, Rodgers, and Mahomes. So really impressive. My only kickback on Nico Collins, I'm not telling you to get rid of him, but just to play devil's advocate really quick, to be realistic a little bit about the first 4 weeks. He played Baltimore, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, and Pittsburgh. All of those are bottom 13 in the NFL versus the pass. So they've been easy matchups for him. You mentioned the matchups, Derek, but I want to add a little color here. At Atlanta, 26. So we saw them just shut down basically the Jacksonville wide receivers. At New Orleans, Marshawn Lattimore definitely will shadow him. Bye week in week 7. Carolina has been interesting, 30th, but that's because you can run all over them. And then Tampa Bay coming up at the 11th spot. So going to have some tougher matchups. We'll see what happens down the stretch here. But Nico Collins and Tank Dell, both the truth, and go trade for all 3 of them because I still don't think people believe in the Texans long term. All right, I got a last one here. Start outside wide receivers versus the Eagles. Short answer is yes. I'm using the slot versus wide tool. Derek had just referenced it. It's on our website for free. The slot versus wide points per game allowed tool. You can do it with players, with slot position, out wide position, take the percentages, take the fantasy points allowed per defenses, things like that. When I go in here, you can customize everything under our tool. It's a really easy search for me. The Philadelphia Eagles have given up the 6th most fantasy points to outside wide receivers. That's 32 fantasy points per game to the outside wide receiver, right? The only teams that have given up more are the Tennessee Titans, Minnesota Vikings, Los Angeles Chargers, Denver Broncos, and Pittsburgh Steelers somehow, right? So all of those you would just assume are good matchups. Philadelphia, though, so dominant last year, they're not. Darius Slay is an animal, but they can be kind of picked apart elsewhere. If I go look at who the Philadelphia Eagles are playing coming up, listen to these wideouts and their auto starts, in my opinion, in these matchups. Puka Nacua is an auto start anyway, but you might have more luck there with Tutu Atwell or even Van Jefferson in a stream if you need it. Then Garrett Wilson came to life a little bit in the Chiefs game that the Jets should have won last night. Then you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They're automatic. But then you have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, who just played very well against these Eagles. And then you have the Dallas wide receivers as well, CeeDee Lamb most notably, but Michael Gallup had a decent game in week 9 as well with Brandon Cooks hurt. And then they have a bye in week 10. So the Eagles are not as scary out wide versus the pass as they were last year. They're very good against the run. So more teams are going to be passing against them. So the short answer is absolutely. Jamie is in the chat. We appreciate that. Matt, of course, following along with us, and Beach. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening. That's what we've got for you for the top 7 takeaways. Before we get out of here, Derek, Gladys, I'll put the floor back to you. First of all, rep each one of your articles. Gladys, I'll let you go first. But also, if there's any other takeaways, personal takeaways from your roster from the first month of the season, any regrets like I have with Nico Collins, anything you're excited about taking somebody you believed in and they blossomed. Give us a little bit more, and then make sure to rep your article for us every week.
Regrets, probably more so people I'm sitting, like, I said Nico Collins last week. I said David Montgomery last week. And I didn't have a quarterback because I had Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers and didn't pick up a third one. So my regrets are just that I'm kind of stupid, I think. The article that I have coming out Wednesday, Thursday, defenses that you can play quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight ends against, because defenses are sexy, people. Don't forget that. Defenses are super, uber sexy. And we are going to make them sexy here at Razzball. That's all I got.
I love that. And your articles are so great because, again, they add so much breadth to the matchups. We talk about it on Sunday mornings when Bob gives his injury report. We talk about defensive linemen, defensive ends, linebackers, corners who are out or they're injured or whatever. Those matter so much for our fantasy matchups, and not a lot of other, avenues are going to give you that kind of content. So Gladys's article is so great at find those matchups and target those weaknesses on the opposing defense. So I appreciate that. Derek, how about yourself? Any regrets, any other takeaways for the first month, and where can we find your article?
Yeah, I tell you, my biggest regret is that I don't have Sam Laporta on every team.
Well, trade Travis Kelce for Sam Laporta.
So,
He'll be better than him at the end of the year.
Yeah, that was I was able to trade for him after week 1 in one league. In fact, in our guillotine league, I was able
not
to
anymore.
trade for him. But that's probably my biggest regret, is that I don't have Sam Laporta everywhere. He's just a fun player to watch too.
He is. He's great. And how about your article coming out?
Yeah. So I write the weekly 5 things to know, and what I do is I use the tools that we've talked about here. They're all free on Razzball, and I look for matchups or certain plays that just make a lot of sense based on the data. And some of the things I picked off last week. Of course, Justin Fields. A lot of people were down on him. I thought this was going to be a good week for him. Sitting Gus against the Browns. Browns are one of the best defenses against the run. Again, our metric shows that. So that was another one of my 5 things to know for last week. So I'll do the same thing for this week, for week 5, and hopefully we'll get some good plays out of it.
I love it. Again, you can check out all of our articles from all of our great writers on football.razzball.com for free. Also, all of those tools, folks, they are there for you to use them. We use them to build the content for these episodes. Please go use them yourself as well. We build them out for you every single Sunday. Of course, you can catch the group 2 hours before kickoff right here on the YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already. Leave a comment below on your favorite takeaway of week 4, but also kind of just the first quarter of the season. The first month is behind us already. And of course, those of you on the go, make sure to download the podcast. Leave us a rate and review. We much appreciate the honesty there. Anything we can work on, we will do so. And 5 stars, of course, are much appreciated. Anywhere you're listening to the Razzball Fantasy Football podcast on top of the YouTube channel. Derek Favret, Derek_Favret, Gladys Tyler at Gladys L. Tyler. My name is Sky Guasco at Sky Guasco on Twitter. Enjoy the rest of the game, everybody. Best of luck in week 5. We will catch you next time. We are out of here.